Happy Thanksgiving, everyone. It is finally the time of year that I look forward to the most because I can get in the kitchen and get the turkey and all those delicious sides together. So today we're going to make our Thanksgiving meal. First, start with preheating our roaster oven. I like to use a roaster oven because to me it makes for a very moist turkey. So you definitely want to make sure that you get your turkey out and wash it really well to get all that brine seasoning off. Remove all of the innards from the inside of the turkey itself. And today we're going to be making giblet gravy. So you want to make sure that you wash all the contents inside as well before placing them into a pot for later use. So here we are, still removing what is inside of the turkey itself. And once we get everything out, we're still going to continue to run water through to make sure that the water runs clear and that we have cleaned our bird really well before preparing it in the next stages. So now I'm going to pick this bird up, continue rinsing and removing the remaining innards that are still inside. And this bird was actually quite different than some because it was almost like going on a hunt for all of the contents inside. So here I am rinsing it really well again before placing it into a pot. Then we just want to continue to rinse, making sure that that water is running clear. Now this contents in this packet will be used later as well as we make our giblet gravy. With our bird all clean, we're going to tuck the wings under the legs to make for a more uniform cook. And everything is going to be perfectly moist and juicy. So you want your bird to look nice and tight like this one. And if you see any of those little feathers remaining inside, you can just pull them out and discard of them. There's nothing worse than getting a little quill in your mouth as you're trying to enjoy your delicious slice of turkey. So with all of that taken care of, we're now ready for the preparation stage itself. With our turkey in the roaster, I like to place some butter over top of the turkey, rubbing it all over the skin, all over the breast section, the wings, and the legs. And this is going to give you a moist turkey, as well as help with browning up that skin during the cooking process. So you just want to make sure that you are very generous with the butter as you are placing it onto the bird itself. The more butter you have, the better this turkey will be. So as you can see here, I used quite a generous coating of butter. So now we're ready to place our lid onto our roaster and get this bird cooking. And the cook time is going to depend on the size of your turkey, so follow the directions per your cooker. So now we're going to make the dressing. I always make my dressing with a package of stuffing mix, and to that I add 1 pound of cornbread that I made the day before and allowed to dry out overnight so that it is perfectly crispy and crunchy. Then we're going to add 1 can of cream of chicken soup. Then we begin stirring, ensuring that we're breaking up those large chunks of cornbread. You don't want it too fine, but you don't want it too chunky either. Then I cut up a whole onion, slicing it into cubes, relatively small. You don't want large chunks of onion in your dressing itself, but if you would like them bigger, that's totally up to you. So then I place a little butter into the cast iron skillet that the cornbread was actually cooked in, and I add the onions that I diced up, and I also slice up some stalks of celery and add them to the same pan as well, making sure that you peel your celery to remove that tough outer skin before you actually proceed to slicing it up into those little chunks to add on in there with the onion itself. So now we're going to go ahead and add in our celery with our onions into the iron skillet. I'm cooking these over medium, and you really only want to cook them long enough until they become slightly translucent and tender. This is basically just taking a little bit of the crunch out of the vegetables. Next, I'm going to add some sage into the dressing mix, then adding in those cooked onions and celery. I also like to add in some dried sage from my garden. And it all depends on your taste preference as to how much celery, onions, and sage you would like to add to your dressing. I really like dressing that is heavily spiced with sage, so you get that strong sage flavor. So I like to add a lot to my dressing mixture, but it is totally up to your taste preference. So once you have everything in there, you want to make sure you stir it up really well. And then adding that dried sage from my garden, I am just going to crumble it up so that it is all distributed evenly and you don't have those large chunks of sage leaves in there. Everyone can get some of that flavor throughout each bite of the cornbread dressing. And here you can see roughly how much of the fresh sage I have added. So at this point, you're going to get your turkey and get some of the pan drippings out and add to your dressing mix. This is what gives my homemade dressing that perfect texture and flavor. And there's really no precise measurement to this. It is all going to depend on how you prepare this. You want to keep adding the liquid from the turkey drippings until you see it begin to come together. It is going to have a sticky texture with a shimmery gloss. So as you can see here, the texture is sticky. It is formed together, pulling toward itself. It's not runny. You almost have to eyeball this mixture. So here I am placing it in a very hot iron skillet. This is what is going to give it that perfect crispy, crunchy edge with that slightly gooey center, which I love. Then the remaining will go into a nonstick pan for those who prefer more of a gooier dressing. Now we're going to make the mashed potatoes. Peeling and rinsing the potatoes, cubing them up, adding in a couple tablespoons of butter, salt, and pepper. And these are more of a rustic style Appalachian potato. So I am going to mash these with a fork as opposed to creaming them with a blender. Because here in Appalachia, we prefer our mashed potatoes to be a little bit textured rather than fully creamy and mashed. As you can see, these are perfect. Now our dressing is ready. We've taken it out of the oven and it's time to flip it out and look at that beautiful, crispy, crunchy perfection. That is what I call a perfect pone of dressing. If you can wait, it is best to let this cool just a little bit so that it stiffens up. But look at that perfect bite. It is gooey in the center, crispy, crunchy, perfect on the outside. That is an Appalachian cornbread dressing. And of course, we can't forget about the other pan, which you can see has that crispy exterior still, but it's going to be a little bit more gooier in the inside. Now we have some homemade candy corn from the garden, which was scraped off just this summer, and I placed it into the freezer for the holidays like this. I'm adding 2 tablespoons of butter to this prior to microwaving it, because when it was placed into the freezer, no butter was put in, because at that point you really don't want to do it, as it can ruin it during the freezing process. Gotta have cranberry jelly, and my favorite side dish, broccoli casserole. So when defrosting your broccoli, it will have plenty of water that comes out, so make sure you drain it before proceeding. Here I am adding onions, about a 1/4 cup of mayonnaise, and a 1/4 cup of cream of chicken soup. And that is really all you need to add to this dish. Stir that together and then add in some sharp cheddar cheese. I like to add about 1/2 cup. Then you're going to stir that really well and add 1 sleeve of club crackers. Now, it has to be club crackers or the texture and the taste will not be the same. And then you add just a few pads of butter so that the crackers get perfectly crispy golden brown. Then you're going to bake it at 350 degrees for about 25 to 30 minutes. Take the tinfoil off in the last 5 minutes for those crackers to get perfectly brown, golden, and crunchy, and it is ready to serve. And you can't forget about the sweet potato casserole. This is my favorite side dish if you want a sweet treat on the side. Just pour your potatoes out of the can into a pan, heating them over the stove, and then Once they're hot, you want to mash your potatoes and add about 1/4 cup of brown sugar and a couple tablespoons of butter. And I like to add some pumpkin pie spice and just a little secret ingredient which makes for the perfect flavor combination: bourbon. Then I place them into a nonstick pan before adding the marshmallows. And place this into the 350-degree oven with your other dishes that are cooking, making sure to watch for those marshmallows to brown. They will brown quickly, so just make sure that you're keeping a close eye on them, especially if you place them on the top rack. And there you have the perfect bite of sweet potato casserole. Now we're going to make our giblet gravy, getting out all of those innards, rinsing them well once again. And ironically, this turkey had 3 necks. I don't know how that is possible, but it's quite interesting. So you place the neck with the liver into a pot of water, allowing it to boil. And you're going to take the liver out before the neck, so make sure you watch for that color change. Then we take the necks out, and here you have your flavored broth water. With that, you're going to take out approximately 1/3 cup and add to a skillet. As you do so, you want to get that liver and begin breaking it apart. And it will have some little stringy tendons in it, so just make sure you pull those out and place those on the side. That definitely does not make for a pleasant bite. Then you're going to mash up your little pieces of the liver. Then with that skillet and your juice, you're going to start adding a couple tablespoons of flour to make your roux. And you want it to be quite a thick paste before you begin adding a little more of that liquid in. Make sure you allow your flour to cook for a couple of minutes and then start adding that liquid from those pan drippings that your neck cooked in. And you want to stir really well as you're doing that. Then once it starts boiling, whisk continuously to get out those lumps and continue stirring until you get a thick consistency and you can tell it is starting to tighten up. At that point, then you're going to add in your chopped up pieces of the liver and stir. And you're almost there to the perfect giblet gravy. And you do want to allow this to cook for a couple of minutes to allow it to tighten up. And once it is finished, you have the perfect giblet gravy to put on the side. Now, we're going to carve our turkey and prepare our plate. Starting with that beautiful, fresh from the garden cream corn. Our cornbread dressing. Our delicious broccoli casserole, which you can see is perfectly crispy. That giblet gravy, which is my favorite, with those added livers. And you can leave those out if that is not your preference, but I definitely prefer it. And there you have it, an Appalachian Thanksgiving meal. And don't forget about dessert. That amplified sweet potato casserole with that perfect secret ingredient. It adds some delicious flavor. Then we have to add our cranberry sauce, whether you want the original or the one that has those beautiful berries inside. That is my favorite. No matter how you combined your meal, you are going to have a delicious Appalachian Thanksgiving meal. So from my family to yours, happy Thanksgiving.